Thank you so much for being with us on a Tuesday night, the greatest day of the week. On behalf of First Amendment Sports, I'm Ken Marangolo. Welcome to the WCAC Spectacular. Want to introduce my co-host for the evening. He is the pride of St. John's, Class 94, Kevin Ricca.
Temper that, Ken. We got to see what happens first. We got the pride of St. John's coming in here shortly, and what a great representative of our league, our conference, and my alma mater.
Without further ado, this week's guest, and I tell you what, we're pretty excited about this one, guys. He's kind of really classing up the basement in a way that normally doesn't happen. I want to say thank you so much to Mike Kelly, St. John's College High School, class of 88, if I'm not mistaken. Mike Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
Well, the honor is all Kevin and I's, my friend. We really appreciate your time. We know.
By the way, I remember watching him play when he was 6 years behind me, and he looks like he still play right now. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mike, what position do you think he could still play?
He used to be a spunky little point guard when I watched him play with my brother.
He still got it.
I'm still funky, but I'm not so little.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, we appreciate you joining, and kind of like the way we work through things. Let's take it back to your roots in the WCAC, and we kind of set the foundation there. At St. John's in the late 80s, still the MAC, right? The Metro back in those days. Maybe tell us a little bit about your time. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there. I know it was a great time on Military Road.
Yeah, it really was, and really having a chance to play basketball in the Metro was a big deal for me, and it was really life changing in my childhood because I had I remember going to Metropolitan Area Basketball School that Coach Wooten and Coach Gallagher obviously ran for so many years there at St. John's, and I attended for the first time in sixth grade heading to seventh. I was just really starting to get into really liking basketball a great deal, and when I got there and just started to see and admire the not only Coach Wooten and Coach Gallagher, but to see so many players and former players that were coming back to coach there. And as a young boy, I just started to really admire them and wanted to emulate them in so many different ways, and then ended up going to middle school at St. John's and ultimately all through high school. So, basketball and having the ability to play in what obviously is one of the greatest conferences in all high school sports across the country was a real thrill. And while I was only, an average player and had a chance to play, it was just looking back now and just reminiscing about who I got to see play, who I got to play with, who I got to play against, is a badge of honor. And it's just a special part of my life, special time in my life looking back.
Mike, I'm 6 years after you, but man, I'm sitting here listening to your path. I also did the metropolitan area, St. John's Middle School. I'm the youngest guy. I played on Joe Gallagher's last team my freshman year. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I know you and I both got to play for Coach. Two guys in the backcourt in the WMAC, but playing on that team, we know what the story was. What a character! What an amazing basketball mind! 46 years. Talk to me about the years that you spent with Coach Gallagher and what those meant for you.
Well, it meant a lot then, and now obviously looking to have the Hall of Fame kind of career he had, and so many 800-plus victories was just a huge milestone. And he did it for so many years for so many young men growing up in the D.C. area. He actually was a coach for my father when my father was playing football at St. John's, so it kind of went back a long way. But yeah, I'll always be grateful to Coach Gallagher. Pushed us all very hard. But always found a creative way to win, and it was fun. I wasn't on the team, but I'll never forget the quadruple stack that he came up with to beat the math of 37-36. It's still a date that rings true for me. And then obviously when I was a junior, we had a really great team, and teammate Poostrack and hitting key free throws down the stretch to beat the math over at Tacoma Academy, or some days it standed out. But with that great team, he took us all to Hawaii for a tournament at one point in time, and just every day was something to learn. And with him and Coach Wooten putting things together for so many young men throughout the D.C. area, it's amazing now throughout my career how many people I've met from the D.C. area, and it all kind of has that roots from playing in the best league in the country, and it's something I'll never forget.
Mike, I remember taking that phone call from Coach Gallagher when my dad was the athletic director back in Gaithersburg, that you guys had upset top 3 team in the nation out there in Hawaii. I believe, was it St. Nicholas Poland time that you guys knocked off?
Well, I wish we knocked them off, but Malik Sealy dunked on us at the buzzer to beat us by one. Yeah. But that was quite a tournament. That was besides the great games. Playing in the Metro, it was going out to Hawaii was a huge thrill. I'll tell you the other memory I really have that meant a lot to me was all the different summer league games that we played at Sidwell Friends or over at Blair, and just kind of thinking through the people that we played against in those leagues as well. But yeah, in Hawaii, it was something else. Malik Sealy was on that team. Adrian Autry was on that team, and a lot of other great players. So I remember all of us kind of sitting in the stands watching other games and watching in amazement with Sam Cassell playing for Dunbar at that point in time. School and some other team they were playing. So it was a lot of good memories going out to Hawaii with the cadets.
Well, you said it, Mike. The best league in the country. And one question I always like to ask guys who are coming from major college conferences and big time college programs like yourself, and you kind of touched on it already, is the way in which news of the WCAC now makes its way to your level and beyond. But I just was wondering if over the last few years, if you had any memories of kind of sitting around on a Saturday or even a weeknight and getting news of some of the amazing things that these kids are up to. And I know some of them are making their way through your gyms and fields, both for your team and for the programs that you compete against. But I mean, do these kids ever let you down? I mean, they're just amazing kids, and of course the coaches as well. But wanted to ask you a little bit about that. How the WCAC continues to impact you and things that you're up to now at the college level.
Well, it's amazing because even though I'm a St. John's alum and on the board of trustees there now, so I stay involved as much as I can. But I take great pride in all the schools from the WCAC. So when I see a kid, whether it's from Gonzaga, DeMatha, wherever they might be from, you always kind of find yourself pulling for them when you're watching them, either competing against us now or obviously watching the NCAA tournament or what have you. I forgot to mention something that it just popped in my head when you mentioned asking about Coach Gallagher. I remember him yelling at me pretty good at a game we were playing against Flint Hill at the Sidwell Friends Summer League, and I think I was out about as far as a guard could be on a 2-3 zone, and Dennis Scott just hitting it from way out, and I evidently wasn't out far enough for Coach Joe, but it even goes back to another person that I've been able to stay in touch with has meant a lot to me. Is I remember we played even a middle school playing at St. Mark's. Which is obviously a big feeder school into DeMatha. We beat them in kind of a last-second free throw there when Gerard Mustaf was on that team, and he and I have kind of stayed in touch through the years on things that he's doing. And then Mike Bray was an assistant coach for Coach Wooten at that point, and with him being now at Notre Dame, and I've been able to stay in touch with him with some of my stints at the ACC and even now. So it's just there's always that just all these ties that bind, so to speak, and it's really really fun to see.
Well, can we, Kevin? I was going to see if Luke and I and you can take us through some of the vitals here for our guest tonight. Starting with kind of, excuse me, what he's up to right now. So the title that he holds and some of the, some of the more prestigious things. I mean, there you go. The VP of Athletics right now at South Florida. I think this one's really cool. The COO of the College Football Playoff for 6 years. Don't think we're not going to ask you a question about that, Mike. And then, of course, the Senior Associate Commissioner of the ACC, as you alluded to, for that 5 or 6 year stint just prior to taking over the College Football Playoff. I mean, I just can't let that go without asking you, I mean, how do you even have Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner with your family or with any of your friends and not just get pelted with questions for that 6 year period of time? I mean, were you quarantining even back then as it got close to Selection Sunday or the process?
Yeah, it's true. I was part of quarantining when quarantining was cool and voluntary, but it was, that was a real thrill. And in that case, certainly as a member of the staff, as the chief operating officer of the College Football Playoff, I didn't have a vote or anything, but my main role was to provide data, video, and to really be in the room as the members consulted about teams and to kind of just give them whatever they needed to be able to draw those comparisons. But it was a real thrill to be in there every week, really, because from about Halloween time all the way through that first weekend in December, they would meet all day Monday and into Tuesday morning to kind of do the weekly rankings, and then as you suggested, when you get to the final conference championship weekend, you're really quarantining. You're watching the various conference championship games, and then getting ready for the final drawing. So when that Big Ten game, which was usually the last conference championship game, ended around about 11 o'clock Central Time, and we would head into the chambers, if you will, for the next 3 or 4 hours to see the final rankings. It's pretty amazing when you think of some of the smartest and most decorated people in the world of college sports and even beyond. When you have someone like Condoleezza Rice and so many other great football players as well in there, and coaches, but to still see them get a little bit nervous and a little bit uptight on something that important, you knew you were a part of something special. So I really appreciated that opportunity to be a part of that.
Well, that was something we were all talking about back home in D.C. We were all proud of you. Obviously, such a big deal to go through all that. It's as recognizable as a brand as there is in our nation right now. So it's got to feel fantastic to have such a huge role in that, Mike. I love the fact that you got started in the sports world selling tickets for the Miami Marlins while you were in grad school at St. Thomas More pursuing your master's in sports administration. Is that where it all clicked? Is that where you said, this is what I'm into, this is what I love?
That's true. It was it was basically New Year's Day of 1993, and I put everything I had in my car and drove down to Miami. I was starting graduate school that semester at St. Thomas University, and but on the way I stopped at Joe Robbie Stadium before I was going to crash at a friend of mine's house for a couple of weeks before I could get into my apartment in Miami, and just said, hey, look, how can I break in? What can I do? And they started me off selling tickets. That led into a internship, and this is all during their inaugural year, which was it's pretty neat to be a part of something the first year, because frankly it was maybe a little bit foreshadowing for some of the things I had in my future, to be a part of 3 different Super Bowl committees, to kind of start from scratch, and then ultimately to be a part of the CFP from scratch. So it was kind of fun to watch some great executives at that point in time put things together at that time, and then it kind of led into a whole lot of things once I completed my graduate degree, and then just things started falling into place career-wise.
Yeah, I guess let's do that the Super Bowl slide. So, only person who ever served as the lead local executive for 3 different Super Bowls. We got 35 in Tampa, 39 in Jacksonville, and 41 in South Florida. The Final Four organizing committee in '99. Obviously, I'm sure just because it's college basketball, it's probably got to be just huge. I want to talk about the Super Bowls because I love the process. I know that it turns people off, depending on if you live there or if you don't live there, if you're happy or if you're not happy. It's coming to your town or not coming to your town. Tampa Bay and South Florida are their own animals, but that Jacksonville Super Bowl, if anyone who's ever followed the planning, if you ever thought about looking into the planning of a Super Bowl, Mike, that's the one, in my opinion, that you have to dig into, because to me, it's such a cool story. Jacksonville is it's not a small town, but it's a small city, and it's not a traditional Super Bowl sized situation. And the creativity you guys had putting that Super Bowl together, I thought was really cool. And so I wanted to ask you about it. Was there just a moment in time? I always tell everyone it was you who raised his hand and said we should put cruise ships in the city at every port and dock. But I just, that whole process to me is cool, and the Jacksonville one just stands out.
Well, having a chance to work with the Final Four and 3 different Super Bowls obviously was a real thrill, and each one of them have their own different challenges. But you're right, to be the smallest city to ever host the Super Bowl like Jacksonville was, and small in terms of the ability of permanent entertainment sites, hotels. In essence, we were about 8,000 to 10,000 rooms short of what you needed to promise in a Super Bowl bid, and I wasn't part of the bid process. I was living in Tampa running that Super Bowl at the time, but I was hired by the Jacksonville executives to kind of help put it together. And so I didn't hatch the idea of the cruise ships, but it became my job and our team's job to find a way to charter those ships, get them into the different parts of the St. Johns River. Make sure they could have. I mean, there was one of the giant ships that we needed that had like 800 rooms on it that you could get it underneath one of the bridges, but you couldn't get it under the next one, so you had to dock that one there, and then you had to find other cruise ships that could get all the way down, all the way down to the Main Street Bridge in Jacksonville. So there was just so much logistical planning that went into that. That was a real challenge. So while it was by no means perfect, it did have a small town feel to it, and that was what made it kind of unique. And to basically create a whole downtown festival and 8 different cruise ships to kind of come to life, and it was special, challenging, not perfect by any means, but when you kind of saw how I do think it was probably maybe the best volunteer force I've ever seen come together for a Super Bowl, because the people were so excited and so passionate about it. So each one of these chapters of my professional life so far have come with a lot of challenges, and that was probably the biggest, but certainly very proud of what our team accomplished there.
Well, you talk about you quarantined before quarantining was cool. You also managed to get a really positive experience for people on a cruise ship right before that whole experience just started changing for everyone. I still don't even know why people were going on cruises anymore. I hear someone like says we're going on a cruise. I'm like, are you being serious? You're going on a cruise right now? Thankfully,
well, the is after Super Bowl Sunday, some people go out pretty good after that, and I remember you sleep in and miss your checkout time in a hotel, it's no big deal. But I distinctly remember this one guy that literally they had to throw his bag off the side when it was pulling off the dock there right in downtown Jacksonville. So there were differences, that's for sure.
Yeah, just throw me that life preserver on Monday, because I'm gonna need it.
Well,
we gotta get Mike on the board in the nation to make that Monday after the Super Bowl a national holiday. I think he's got the job. And
should be.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That brings me to my next question. I want to get off that path just for a second now. So I grew up with your little brother Craig, one of my favorite guys from St. John's. Kareem Watts reached out to me. We've talked about trying to get you on. He reached out a week and a half ago. And, Kareem's in the middle of a lot of these deals. He's such a good man. We're just sitting around talking about old school and watching you play at St. John's. But, I do know this, Mike. You're a lover of music. You know a ton of lyrics. Ken and I are in the same boat, man. We'll sit here. We freak T Strachan out. T Strachan says to say hello, by the way. There's only enough room for 3 of us right here tonight, but he wanted to be here, but he said to make sure he said what's up. So let me just tell me, is this true or false? Because, I don't always believe what I read on the internet. Your senior thesis at Wake Forest as a political science major was rap music as a political communicator. Is this true?
True.
I love it.
There was a whole lot of Public Enemy in that one. There was a whole lot of Public Enemy in that.
They wrote some of the best protest music. I totally agree with that. We talk about it all the time. That to me, Public Enemy is protest music at its finest.
It was awesome. And interestingly, when I was at Wake Forest there too, she wasn't my political professor, but to have Dr. Maya Angelou was one of my humanities teachers, and especially with the times that our country's going through right now, to kind of draw back on some of the lessons that she taught us, and to kind of always like to call back to some of her lines and poetry and famous quotes, because that was another very important part of my life, and I felt blessed to have a chance to get to know her at that time in my career.
Well, I know that Kevin would play a game with you where he would say, "Who said it, Sade or Maya Angelou?" I'm confident you'd be able to differentiate between the two.
I
could, but you just mentioned 2 of my favorite women in all the world.
All right, well, Ken, let me hit him with this one first, and we're getting back to that. You got to give me the top 3 here, Mike. Put them in order for me. Outkast, De La Soul, and A Tribe Called Quest.
Tribe Called Quest first, and De La Soul second, and then Outkast third. But all good.
Just a couple of guys from Gaithersburg that went to St. John's, Ken. On the same page again. Where do you got it, Ken?
Well, I got Tribe right up here on the wall behind me.
Well,
so
Tribe's number 1.
They're number 1 all day, and De La Soul, obviously, that was a big influence in my early days at McNamara. Tribe and De La Soul. I mean, I love Outkast, but not as much as I love Tribe and De La Soul. Tribe more than almost any other musical act for me.
Getting off scene for a bit. I remember my first concert was going with Derek Higgins, another St. John's alum. We went to New Edition down at the Washington Convention Center. That was like
Oh, yeah.
it was like seventh grade, I think. And then I think my 15th or 16th birthday, a whole bunch of us on the basketball team went to Whitney, Houston. So that was a good deal too. It was good.
That's amazing.
Hey, Kevin, do you still have the blue and red reversible Metropolitan Area Basketball School jersey that everybody had back?
I would kill for one or one of those T-shirts. I saw my nephew on one of those T-shirts the other day. Someone must have had that in the box for 25 years. But what a brilliant idea! I'd like to bring them back. Ken, write that on the T-shirt idea.
That should totally be for what you guys sell on this podcast. It should totally be the spectacular shirt. Bring back the basketball school reversible tees. Be good.
Well, were you wearing the Pumas back then or the Champions, Mike?
Oh man, I think it started with Pro Kids, and then we moved on to. Then I think we moved on to the Pumas. We hit the big time by the time we got near the end with Puma, but that was good. You know, one other story you keep making me think about that was awesome. Another WCAC story, but you know, Adrian Dantley lived right down the street from St. John's when I was when I guess I was in middle school, and I would go and just we would all play pickup ball before practice started, you know, in September, October, and then when everyone would leave, and I was kind of waiting for my father to pick me up from on his way home from work. And Adrian Dantley, Coach Gallagher would give Adrian Dantley the keys to the gym. He'd come in and work out one-on-one on his own, and again, just another guy that was also you know, obviously was the NBA's leading scorer many years, a legend at DeMatha, a legend at Notre Dame, and you know, it's just amazing all the different connections that you have. But he's the perfect example of someone that, and they used to say this at that basketball school. I remember Morgan saying it a lot. You know, hey, he's not the most gifted athlete by any means, but he practices the heck out of these fundamentals that we're teaching you. And sometimes it doesn't resonate because sometimes people are just so skilled and so athletic. And he was, of course, but he kind of showed me, and I think many others, just ways that if you just practice like crazy and get things going, you can go all the way to the top. And so having a chance to watch his work ethic and kind of play with him a little bit, he'd go one-on-one full court, and it was kind of surreal for a seventh grader to try to hang out with an NBA All-Star, but it was a lot of fun. But just another example of the greatness of the WCAC.
Mike, I got to see that myself when I was doing my workouts. You know, just 2 years after you left, I was in the middle school. I was in middle school the year after you left. Adrian Dantley worked out consistently for those next 6 years. He played full court one-on-one. And Mike, you'd be happy to know, I read an article that reported that at Morgan Wooten's funeral, Adrian Dantley was 2.5 hours early, first guy at the gym, once again.
That's awesome. Not surprised. That's really cool. Really cool.
Well, I was going to say, as a senior, you probably got a chance to see a young Lawrence Moten in the Metro in your days at St. John's, Mike.
Sure did. And I remember losing to Carroll, I guess my senior year down there, and they had a guard named Charlie Harrison as well. And I got to know Charlie a little bit later because he went to Wake Forest when I was working down there. But a funny story is I remember being a counselor for him since he was younger than me, and he came up to me after that game and said, "Hey, Michael, it's little Charlie, your counselor from Metropolitan Area Basketball School." I was like, "You learned well, my son." as you just schooled us, you and Lawrence just beat us in a big game, but it was a lot of fun.
He was a smooth player.
Gonzaga doesn't still have that rubber court that I couldn't dribble on, do they? They're good.
No. They got rid of the old rubber court.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we got to touch on something I think that got to be a source of pride for you, the performance of the South Florida programs across the board academically. And I know that we captured this tweet. We wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to see it. All the ways in which the kids that come through South Florida are achieving in the classroom. And I mean, shoot, how many colleges can say all these things, Mike? I mean, that's so impressive, and I think that it speaks volumes to the kind of program you are part of leading down there. So, hat tip to you, hat tip to all you guys down there. This is just a cool set of numbers.
Hey, well, thanks for pointing that out, and our obviously our student athletes, coaches, and certainly our academic services folks have worked really hard on that. It is part of our, it's part of the mission. Having young men have a chance and women have a chance to, get their higher education through playing the sport they love, and that's ultimately what it's all about. But to particularly do that well, in a semester where they were all adjusting to remote learning and obviously the pandemic that we've got. It's really, really special. So, coming back to South Florida I was an associate AD here for about 2 years earlier in my career, about 20 years ago. I was the first hire of the athletic director at the time there, Leroy Selman, who I know you all know of as being just a great football player at Oklahoma and ultimately with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Hall of Famer in both college and pro, but he was also a Hall of Famer in life. And so being a chance to be on his staff, and then unfortunately with him passing a couple of years ago, and when this chance came back almost 2 years ago now when I took this job, it was kind of it was personal for me, and having a chance to come back and continue to help fulfill his vision and those of many others that have helped put USF on the map. I love that we're a relatively young university, only been around since 1956. We've only played football for 22 years, but to have a program that's reached number 2 in the country, to have back in 2007, to have a program that won 150 games faster than any program in the state of Florida. That includes Florida State, Florida, Miami, and UCF. So we know we've accomplished a lot so far, and we got a lot to go. But it's exciting, and we're looking forward to setting a new standard at USF in and off the court.
Well, I know you said it. Also, you said it best earlier when you said that when you see guys coming through, no matter what school. I know Kevin and T and I like to say that you hate each other for 4 years and then you love each other for the rest of your life. And I know one of the cool things on this show when we get to talk to folks like you is that we give people a reason to root for something they never thought they'd root for. And when South Florida comes up on the TV guide and you see they're playing basketball or football or anything for that matter, I know a lot of folks in the WCAC will now know why they should be rooting for South Florida, and it's because of you. I just like you said it when you said it's personal. It says volumes because it's personal for us, and you clearly have taken that spirit of coming from this place and made a new place better for your presence. So I don't know. I want to thank you first and foremost for your time, but I definitely I feel pretty privileged to be able to share your story with a bunch of folks who might not otherwise have had a reason to root for South Florida athletics. They sure got one now, Kevin.
Well, I appreciate that. I was really honored to be able to join your show today, and it allowed me to reminisce and think about so many teammates and many friends that I've stayed in touch with. But again, I love the way you got to bring the whole league together, because like you said, they were either folks that we played against or again, as I said earlier, that tie that binds is amazing. And just like I watch and admire, because as soon as a kid went to one of the WCAC schools, they went through something special, and you're rooting for them, even if they're not a St. John's guy at this point. I root for them all. And, even you mentioned we have a big rivalry right now with UCF. Johnny Dawkins is the head coach there. He went to Mackin. When he and I first talked, again, it's funny. That's the first thing you talk about. Hey, I played for Coach Gallagher at St. John's. Like, oh man, and then talk about Metropolitan Area Basketball School, and it all just kind of flows back to life in DC in one of the greatest leagues.
Well, we took up the amount of time we promised that we would, Mike. And I once again, on behalf of Tim Strachan and Kevin Ricka, I want to say thank you. If you find yourself up here and you're looking for a basement to hang out in on a Tuesday night to talk about high school sports, or the Redskins for that matter, please do not hesitate to check us out. And we definitely want to have you back on, as soon as possible. And once again, thank you so much, and best of luck to you. If you plan a Super Bowl using cruise ships in the smallest city to ever host a Super Bowl, I have no doubt that men like yourself are going to figure out how to get these kids an education this fall. And I don't envy your position or your job, but I know that that's why God puts people like you in charge. We were told a couple weeks ago, Mike, one of our guests, Marco Clark, a former DeMatha coach and longtime president of Bishop McNamara, which is where I went, and he said, God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called. And so I know that for you, in the challenges that people in your position are facing right now are steep, but I got no doubt that you're up to the task.
Well, I appreciate that. Challenges are hard for everybody. We're all in this together and having to battle through some very unusual times. But great to touch base with you, Ken and Kevin, and to all you out there that I know from back home, great to see you. Thanks for tuning in, and everyone keep your horns up. We're pulling for you. Take care.
All right, Mike Kelly, Pride of St. John's, class of '88. Bishop McNamara, class of '94. That's this guy right here. Kevin Ricka, Tim Strachan, Luke David, Vic Maddox. We appreciate all you guys. Until next Tuesday night, this was the WCAC Spectacular. See you next week. Thanks, guys.